Welcome to Shifting People, where we talk about the people behind technology. Our primary topic today is problems. Epic problems. Problems everywhere, and not a solution to make. So I'm here with my co-writer and colleague of all things, Pete Oliver Kruger, and we will cover this topic. So Pete, what do we have to say about these epic problems?
I'll probably start off with a story just to give everybody a setting. It's an example of a time when I used a technique called prioritize problems as a way to help a group of people figure out a little bit more about what was really going on within their projects so that they could better understand the best path forward.
So we have seen a lot of companies that, first off, they prioritize everything and they have a prioritization challenge, but they don't often even understand where they're going with what things they're prioritizing to do. So, does this story help out those businesses with figuring out what to do first, second, and third?
It definitely does. It starts with a process of having a conversation. Sometimes it can go as fast as just 1 hour. The one I'm going to talk about today, we actually went through within like an hour, maybe an hour and a half, 90 minutes. Have gone back and done these in more detail with other teams, but it really does help them to create some kind of a clarity about what is more important than another. And often everybody has their own opinions about what is the most important thing based on their perspective, based upon what they know. And so it's not that prioritization isn't being done, but prioritization may be different from person to person working on the same project. And we have to have a way to get everybody on the same page in a way that they do not unintentionally undermine each other.
Right, right. Here, I mean, we always work in the IT industry and we always hear about software. We're dealing with just software problems, right? Is that true?
This actually examples comes from the hardware field. So a lot of these things apply over in the software field as well. I have done this with political organizations and government organizations and software organizations, but this example right here is going to be something from the manufacturing world.
All right.
Yeah, so I've had to adjust things so as not to reveal any confidential information, but this entire conversation is based on true events.
All right, fantastic. We do not want any of the lawyers or legal counsels coming towards us, so we've got this covered. Thank you.
Exactly. I was working with a team that started with, a long list of requirements. I'm gonna put the requirements up on the screen so you can see kind of what they were tackling with. They had a project that needed to be completed within 9 months. The whole point was to update their product against a set of new industry regulations. They also had a catalog of 20 different product variations. So for the production of this, the design of this, the implementation, the building of it, same general product, but they had to build 20 different versions of it. At the same time, they were being asked to reduce their cost by 5%. It had to have the same dimensions that the current product had. And there was a connector to connect this device that was on the bottom of the product. And the request came in from product to move it to be able to basically set it up plugged in from the left or the right. There's also some barriers inside of this. There's electrical product, and we wanted to make it safer, so we needed to prevent against accidental damage during repairs. And the last thing they added to the list was to update it with new branding colors. So they were going through an update to their brand, and they had a new process for a new color scheme, new fonts, new designs, all that kind of stuff. And they wanted the product to be able to reflect the new brand so that when you see it on the shelves, it pops out and you're like, ah, that belongs to this company.
Wow, that sounds like you've got a whole bunch of different directions to look at, and it's like one of those Elmer Fudd's "He Went That Away" type thing with Bugs Bunny and go in all directions, and you're just going to pull yourself apart as an organization. So how did you go about deciding what was the important things to talk about first?
Yeah, it really was this kind of impossible task to accomplish with all of those requirements that were listed there. Everything conflicted against each other. So they knew upfront that they could meet the new regulations in 9 months, but not if they had to make any additional changes. If they were just updating for the regulations, they found a path, a way that they could do that. They also could incorporate some changes, but they would only be able to get maybe about 25% of the catalog done in 9 months, but not the entire catalog. They could also reduce the costs, but they were being asked to add features like a new barrier and a new direction in the ways that the wires went. That required new parts, that required new validation of different parts that they had already and adjustments, which was already going to be adding to the cost because each one of those steps, each one of those processes added additional costs. So they would have to find cost savings elsewhere to offset the new changes that were being added. The barriers were not going to change the dimensions of the product, but the barriers did that they were asked for did actually prevent them physically from being able to change the way that the device was wired, the way that it
Hmm.
was built inside of it. You could not do the two of those things at the same time. It was not possible with the configuration that they had. And the change in the color was not a simple change in the color. It actually introduced a lot of additional cost, both because they couldn't buy off-the-shelf products using standard colors that were out there in the industry, part of the point of the brand design, but also the cost of the paint for the color that was chosen was actually much more expensive than the other brands, the other colors that were out there. So each one of these things, each request played against each other, and they were undermining one requirement, undermined the other, as far as the ability to be able to tackle them all.
Oh, wow. That's really a lot of conflicts. And I'm sure the leadership was in conflict with each other based on what they wanted to see happen on their side. So that tug of war, the Bugs Bunny analogy, which way to go, ends up pulling in multiple directions. It may look very difficult. And you got time to market here, right?
They had run through many of the sort of debates. I might jokingly say that for the leadership, it wasn't a problem. Just do all the things. But the team had the problem of trying to integrate all those different things together. And they were the ones that knew how all of this worked. But because they kept pushing back and saying, we can't do all of these things, we got to take something off. And nobody wanted to be the person to volunteer to say, yes, you can take my requirement off the list. So they
Mhm.
had a debate, they submitted it up. Somebody else said, nope, you can't change that. You got to put it back in. So then they submitted it back up, and somebody else came back and said, oh, you can't take my thing off the list. That one has to go back in. And they have been doing this actually for several years, which is why they were down to 9 months. They actually had a 3-year advance notice that this was happening. And it took them 2 years of debate to get to the process of running out of time. And it really was when they ran out of time that they're like, we got to do something different. Okay, Pete, go ahead and try your new idea, and let's see if you can do anything with this. So that meant that there had been about 2 years that their competitors already knew about this, and several of their competitors already had products that they had released into the market. So if they didn't meet this deadline within 9 months, they were not going to be able to sell the product anymore. At the same time, many of their competitors had already met the deadline and were out into the marketplace. So customers were already starting to look at new thinking and planning for the future, maybe switching over to other things. Then certainly when that deadline hit and their products were no longer in the marketplace, there was going to be a big, necessary switch over to competitors' products to get out there. But this getting stuck over the requirements was keeping it from getting a green light. And since they couldn't get a green light, they couldn't start working on it.
All right. So the sense of urgency, check. We had 3 years, we're down to 9 months. Competitors eating our market share, check. many different directions we could go, and we keep running into ourselves. Check. What do we do there? How do we get out of this mess?
So the format that I'm going to walk through in this story is called prioritized problems or prioritized epic problems. The whole point is to switch us away from the talking about solutions to talking about problems. So I took the list of requirements that they had, and we kind of started at the top of the list and we went down looking at them, but we translated them from the solution ideas that were up on the board, the list of requirements, to what were the problems that caused this in the first place. So the first problem that was on that list of requirements was UL certifications. Might seem like a straightforward kind of idea that we have to apply UL, but we ran the process as well. What were the reasons why? What were the problems behind the changes that needed to be had? And they were very important problems. There were actually electrical technicians that had become electrocuted because they were working inside of this product on one component. They were not touching another version of it, but something would slip. A hand would slip. They would hit this other place and they would be electrocuted on it. And so the goal of this was to make sure that there was no possibility for any kinds of accidents. So a really good, important reason for that. So we put that up there and said, all right, this is definitely something that we want to support, that we want to do, that we have to do. We definitely want to stay in this market. Good reason to do this, and it's very clear that the problem is the expiration of the original certification in a 9-month time. So we put a sort of just a descriptor around it, a time to market, and saying that this time to market of getting this product out into the field was our number one problem that we were trying to tackle. So we want to prevent electrocutions. We need to get it out in 9 months before the certification expires, and we need to get it out as soon as possible because we are losing customers to other companies.
That is a very clear constraint that can bring everything else in together and achieve focus. So I'm excited a little bit now. It's like, we're starting to get a clearing of the path. Where do we go from here?
So we went on to the next item in the list. And so that had to do with implementing the full catalog. So we asked ourselves, going backwards, what were the reasons behind that? What were the problems as to why we needed to implement the entire catalog? We knew one already, which is that there were competitors that were already in the market. And if we didn't have the full catalog in the marketplace, then they would still be going to the competitors for this version of the product, even if they could get this version, the different version for it. But we also discovered that a lot of the groups like wholesalers and the contractors that were using these products and installing them like to have a single source to be able to order the whole field from. And if they had to order half their products from this company and half their products from the competitor, and the competitor had the whole catalog, it's just easier to place one order with the competitor than it is to place 2 orders and track 2 separate orders for different things and make sure that all that stuff was up to date. So that was a very important portion for the sales team, was we need to get this full catalog out there. So because we will continue to lose clients for this reason, anybody who wants a single source is going to switch to our competitors until we get the catalog replenished again.
So what did you do to address that whole catalog? But you had 20 products. It sounds like a lot to do within a 9-month time frame.
Yeah, so we kept from getting too far into solutions, but we did some more research into the data behind the catalog and the various different variations so that we'd have some collective information to do this. And one of the things that we did pull up in the research was that there were 4 variations of the product that were responsible for 70% of the sales.
Wow.
And those 4 variations, if we did just those, super simple, easy, we can get that out within 9 months. So
Nice.
it turns out that there were, if we went for the full catalog, and this was the additional problem that sort of came out of this, is that it would put us past the deadline. So we would sell no product between now and the deadline. We would sell no product from the deadline until the full catalog was done so that we could produce the variations that only accounted for 30% of their sales. So we switched the conversation to separating those things out and saying if we can do 4 variations on this and get it out to market with 70% of the sales, then what we're talking about the delay, we've reduced the problem from 100% of the sales being stopped to 30% of the sales being stopped.
Yep. A bird in the hand is worth two in the bush.
Exactly. So once we put it in those terms and we talked about that and we were, expressing it in terms of like salespeople, we get it, we understand. The goal here is to help you sell product and make sure that you have something to sell, even if it's only 70%. Sales understood it, they got in line, and that was actually very easy to get into. So we decided to go ahead and produce this product in waves and send it out in that different portion of things. All right, so the next thing that was up there in the requirements list was the margins. So they wanted us to be able to reduce cost. Now, anytime you change a product, as we all know, there are costs involved. There's the cost of the staff of actually implementing this work and spending the time to figure out the new designs and the implementation of it. They were willing to set aside those costs. That wasn't going to count into the budgets for this particular product, but you still have additional costs of time spent with suppliers in setting up and testing a new version of the product and the new pieces of it. You have to change the manufacturing line and then test the new manufacturing line with the new equipment because it has now changed and there's a chance that you introduce something in. So every single step along the way adds a little bit more to the costs. So to keep it even, just dead even, you have to find a way to switch out and reduce costs elsewhere, either by getting cheaper parts or switching over other parts. Now you've changed a few other different places, and now those places have to be tested. So it becomes this compounding thing that really made the cost reduction more expensive. And so once we had sort of laid those things out and talked about the trade-offs on that, people were basically saying, if you can find a way to reduce the margins, great. But try to see if you can just at least keep it at the same cost. But we prioritized those margins down below that. It was more important to get the catalog out there. It was more important to get the thing to market within 9 months or very shortly afterwards.
All right, so you've gotten some level of agreement on the cost control measures. Then what did you else do to constrain all of the different challenges you had?
Yeah, so then we moved down through the other different requirements that had popped up, and there were some requests for changes. One was don't change the product dimensions. The other one was the change in the variability of the connectors. So we asked about what were the problems behind some of those things and how did that lead that. For example, the one about the do not change the dimensions of size. One of the differentiators for this company was that this product was smaller than all the competitors.
Hmm.
And so for people who did not have a lot of space, they really liked buying this version of the product because it fit in more locations. And because of how it was wired and connected up, it would fit in a smaller location, but only if power was coming from one direction, which is why they wanted the other one, because this would then create additional diversity within their product line or possibilities. More customers could install it because it was configured and coming from other different directions. So it was a really good reason to set this up and do this. But it was going to require some extra finagling inside of the box to do this. Now, they had done some research on this already over the previous several months, and they had actually identified a new architectural change that could accomplish a few of these things. It might require less parts. It might bring down the margins a little bit. It would add 3 more months to the process to do the new design, go through the testing process of that. So now they were looking at like not being on time, and now architecture was asking to add 3 more 3 more months to that. So originally they were hesitant on this, to say the least. But the thing about the new architecture is that it would add the ability to add the additional connections.
Ah,
So it accomplished a bunch of the goals, a couple of the requirements that were on there. And so they started talking about back and forth what was worth it, what wasn't worth it. And they talked about sort of the sales cycles and how things came in. And they realized that they did probably have about 3 months given purchasing cycles, where even if they were not out into the market and they weren't out into the market for another 3 months afterwards, it probably would not hurt their sales very much. So they said the additional market variety, the different market differentiation that we can have from the additional connection points by keeping the small size in this brand new architecture is actually a selling point that we can sell, which can then help us to boost sales later on. So they did a swap and they said, we are willing to give up to 3 more months for this to make work. And we'll even bend on the costs and say that if you can give us more variation, we will agree to even up to an increase of 5%. But if you're given above an increase in cost of 5%, and definitely if you're above 10%, it's a no-go. We would not be able to make up that money. But it allowed to have some negotiations there. So we put in some parameters on there that you can see in the list of prioritized problems. We put those up towards the top, said these were some of the most important problems that we had. And if you can solve it in these ways, you're a go, everything's good, keep going it. As soon as you start to hit this threshold, we got to put the brakes on and we have to switch gears.
okay. So that's great that the market design changes for that would make such a big difference. And you talked about there's going to be a little more of a cost with doing that. The timeline seems a little more pressured, but yet it seems reasonable and there's checks for it. What about the growth part of it? What about sales? Was there anything that came through from the customers regarding their needs?
Yeah, you can see in the list of requirements that there was that discussion about a what they called a mirror version. They wanted, there were some places that needed to be able to have the reverse of what it was.
Hmm.
So we asked why, getting into it, and it had a lot to do with the wiring. So we realized that with the new architecture that they had already just talked about doing and prioritizing, it would set up the a solution to the problem so that you
Hmm.
wouldn't need to create a new variation of the product.
Oh, good.
The ability to be able to wire it up in multiple different directions actually solved the same problem. So by identifying the problem behind this requirement, we realized that this solution, this idea that somebody had proposed and put on the requirements list was actually obsolete and not necessary. And we were actually just able to take it off the list entirely. And so this idea of a mirror version of it just dropped down to the bottom and pretty much disappeared.
Oh, wow. Well, what about colors, right? Hey, there's been iPhone with an orange color, and colors are hot and making things look spiffy. Seems pretty important in the industry right now. How was that addressed here?
Yep. So that was the last one that was on this list that was coming around. They were already, predisposed to make this one of the lower priority requirements, but we wanted to see if it was possible to get done. But it really just wasn't.
Hmm.
Given everything else, given the necessary architecture changes, given the need for speed, given the changing to the parts and the testing and all the additional costs that were going to be built in inside of it, it wasn't a simple case of just changing the color and buying a different paint.
Hmm.
The paint that for this particular color did not bond to the product very well, so they needed to use a different brand of paint, and that brand of paint was only created by one supplier, and that supplier was back ordered, which meant that it
Yeah.
would have delayed the timeline for that. So immediately we started looking at these things, and the priority order had already kind of been established, and we just put that in the list and said, all right, New color is going to impact time to market, so we're going to decide not to do it. New color is going to help with market differentiation, but people are more concerned about situations than they are about anything else. New color is going to affect the margins in the wrong direction. So the branding itself is unfortunately going to have to drop down. Out of that, that can be something that we can look at doing as a minor change maybe in a few months, but let's not let that keep us from getting the product out into the market and getting the whole catalog out into the market so that we make sure that we don't lose any customers.
All right. Well, it sounds like you got from cobwebs to clarity here. With you have now a clear time frame, what the amount of the catalog is going to be done, what extra costs you're willing to sacrifice there for the wiring, and what market differentiation you don't need to do because you solve a different problem by addressing the initial problem of the wiring, and you realize that the gee whiz bells and whistles aren't the same as iPhones. You don't need to worry about it as much with these products. And so that gets out of it, and your constraints now are very clear. It looks simple now from what you say. So how did it turn out?
Well, better than expected, which is always great when that happens.
Yeah.
So we do what we often do in a pep talk, which is we kind of framed it and said, we are going to try to solve all of these problems if we can. But the list of the prioritized problems tells us in what order to go. So we're going to solve the most important problems first. And if we can't solve a lower order problem without making a higher order problem worse, then we know which ones to drop, and everybody is agreed on what the order is. We took a vote, we talked about it, everything sort of worked out. So we had our kind of marching orders to get through this. We had our wave strategy. We had our margin targets of what we were trying to do. And the team did a great job of sort of breaking this down, figuring out what to do. So remember, there was this first wave of products that was the 70% of the catalog. So they actually ended up delivering that 5 months ahead. Then they had some other modifications they did, which were unexpected, which caused them to slip by another 2 months. But they were still 3 months ahead. So it went from we got 9 months to get this out the door. We brought it back by 5 months. We lost 2 months in the middle, but we're now still 3 months ahead of time.
Wow.
And it was because they didn't have to deal with so many different variables at once. They were just focused on that architecture change that they needed to do, which was automatically going to handle several of the features by default and allow them to deliver wave one in the simplest and easiest way possible. So they didn't have to design for lower cost. They didn't have to design for the mirror layout. They didn't have to design for the new barriers. They didn't have to design for the new paint. They didn't have to, and every time you have a new variable like that and make change to one thing, it makes it more, now you have to check this one and you have to verify that one. You have to this change, you make. So by reducing the number of variables, it made it a faster, more streamlined thing, which is how they were able to reduce so much time in the schedule to get there. Then they discovered that wave two, which was the next 20% of sales, they could get done in the course of about another 4 or 5 months. So they were given 3 to 6 months past the expiration date to get that done. They were able to not only meet that deadline, but actually bring it in closer to the actual expiration date. So that additional 20% of sales was not going to be out of the market for very long, 1 or 2 months. As the salespeople had already identified, it was a slow purchase time anyway. The purchases were going to come later, so it was fine for that product to be late. And then wave three, which was the next 6% of their product line, came in 5 months after expiration, and then wave four, the entire catalog, was delivered 8 months after the expiration date. So they got most of their revenue in time with no missed sales. Then they picked up the additional 30% revenue, periodically adding more revenue throughout the next 9 months. And getting all that stuff together. And when it all was done, they actually delivered every requirement on the original list except the new color of paint.
Ah.
within actually earlier than the original delivery date that they had given, which was that they were going to miss the date and they were going to be like, so they delivered everything they had originally promised within the timeline that they originally promised. But by prioritizing the problems and changing the order and solving problems in a prioritized fashion, they produced more revenue in the same amount of time than if they had just gone with the original schedule. So it's another great sort of learning that comes out of a lot of these things, that the team knows kind of how long it's going to take to do the entire project with the requirements and all that kind of stuff. But how you order the work makes a difference on when you get the money.
Yeah.
The work is going to take the same amount of time to do all of the work, but you reorder the way that you do things and you get the money faster.
All right. Wow. That is a truly impressive success story, Pete. And so, main learning points that I've heard, and I'm sure you've got more, being in mens rea, being in the middle of it, is that you give yourself constraints by reorganizing or resequencing the priority of our work. And we haven't gotten exactly how you get those techniques successful. There's more to it than that, I believe, from what I know about epic problems like this. But in the process of doing that, you end up having very clear instructions on the order and getting one thing done after another thing done with your limited time frames there, which are much more successful than just keep trying to do it all at once.
Exactly. One of those principles of agile, that when one is the point of like slowing down, like nobody wanted to have this meeting. They were like, we just gotta go, gotta go, gotta go, gotta go. Well, by taking the time to have the conversations, schedule it, get it on the clock, get everybody on the Zoom call at the same time to be able to have live conversations with each other. It wasn't an easy
Mm.
thing to do, it wasn't a quick thing to do, but through that process, it enabled us to move faster and get things out the door faster.
That's the fantastic example of the slow down, the speed up, that everyone's not moving against each other. Now they're moving together in unison, which made them speed up. So, what is your? Let's go through the human side of this. What was your opinion about the whole thing? It did you find this very effective, and how did you feel going through this? Was it successful in that? They learned a lot. How did it turn out, and your feelings about how it went?
I love this exercise so much for a lot of the people side, the human side, the emotional side of this. Because what often happens, actually, pretty much every time I run this exercise, what happens is you start off with people who are mad. They are at each other's throats. They are frustrated. You hear it in their things. They are determined. They are solid. I need this to happen, and I'm not budging an inch. And then they talk about the problems. They hear the problems that other people are talking about. They start to understand a little bit more about all of the other things and how the they interplay with each other. One of the sayings that I have that I use in these facilitations is that if we solve one problem at a time, we will cause other problems. It's only when we can see all of the interconnecting problems at the same time that we can
Mm,
solve all of the problems.
mm. That's great words. Great words. Fantastic. And you love doing this because it gives aha moments of the entire system and everything that's going on that they're often blinded by when they work within their own silos, if you will. And everybody, we all have our bias, we all have our silos, and it's good to open that up. So you've got this facilitation technique that does it.
So the second thing that I see once we get into this is after the sharing has happened and people have started to understand more about the problems of other people, they start to become more curious. You start to hear comments about, well, all right, so what about if we did this? And they start offering up an alternative version of what they had originally offered. And that
Mm,
opens up the door to this collaborative portion, to this process of being able to. And then as it gets closer to the end of it, people are switching over from being angry with each other to being collaborative. They usually are much more jovial. Oftentimes they're cracking jokes. They're starting to build new ideas together. They are crafting ideas that are a composite of each of their different things, which are, we say the whole is better than sum of the parts. And they get into this whole thing, and then inevitably something pops up. And so we call it the Ratatouille principle,
ah,
named after the movie Ratatouille.
yes.
And there's a speech at the end by the critic, and he goes into talking about how he was surprised at some of the things that had happened in this restaurant, and it helped him to learn more about this famous phrase of this famous chef that he had always been critical of, who had this phrase that anyone can cook. And he said, "Not, I've tasted food, I've tasted bad food. Not everybody can cook." But what he
Hmm.
realized and came to realize was it wasn't that everybody can cook, but a good cook could come from anywhere.
Hmm.
And the same thing is true here inside of this. And this is what we call the Ratatouille principle, which is that it's not that every idea that comes up is going to be a great idea, best idea, or maybe even not, it could be a good idea. But we never know where a great idea is going to come from. So we have to have a process that allows us to take these ideas as they bubble up and give them some space to be developed into better ideas because we never know which one is going to be the one that really takes off. And one of the things I love about this format is after the collaboration starts and they leave behind all the bad feelings, these new ideas pop up that nobody had ever thought of before the meeting started. And the best ideas can sometimes just come right in the middle of the session and change the way the project is done from that point on. And I love those moments. They love those moments. That was fantastic. They got some things out of that that they weren't expecting to. We actually had some people afterwards who were talking about how that was like, they was like, this, one of the sales guys was like, that was the most productive meeting I have had in years. That was fantastic. And he goes back first and he was like, I've been with this company for, I don't know, it's probably like something like 20, 30 years, and this is the way it used to be in the old days. We used to be able to go 4 times as fast as we're doing now, and I'm glad to see it's getting back to the old spirit. That was a great time back then, and I feel like we've finally recaptured that collaborative spirit between sales and engineering and the product.
Ah, so impressive, Pete. So impressive. And I love the idea of popcorn there. The popcorn's popping. We have the Ratatouille principle within our book, Shift from Product People. It's in the back over here. And also it is with a popcorn machine as well, I might want to add. And it is fantastic that a great idea can come from anywhere and anyone. And it's just a matter of the culture and the mindset of the people involved and the situation to allow that idea to flourish. So, Pete, I would like to say thank you for sharing this hardware software situation. And may Pete's perspective have shifted your thoughts as well as part of this dialogue. So keep shifting to new places, and we'll see you next time.